Hey there, and welcome to Beyond the Books podcast. We are so grateful that you're joining us today. My name's Ben. I'm joined by my co host, Tyler. Tyler, how are you doing?
Just living the dream one day at a time. How are you?
Living the dream is what we love to hear. I'm doing great. And before we really even get started, I thought it would make sense to do some formal introductions, seeing that this is our inaugural episode. So I'll go first, and I'll kind of detail out my career as a whole. But folks know my name is Ben. I am the CEO of BobaTalks. I've had what feels like a whirlwind of a career. I started my career in college thinking that I was going to be a lawyer and then quickly pivoted away from that. I think my freshman year, I already knew. And then moved into HR, moved into sales. So I spent a year at sales in Macy's. I was doing retail sales. Uh, Honestly, did enjoy it. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But then moved into Google as an HR coordinator. And then at Google, I've had kind of the gamut of experience from moving to project management and then program management. And then I was a manager of other program managers. And then I became a product manager. So just all of the managing of things, which has been kind of fun. And then I also spent 6 years with the California State Guard doing HR technology for them, culminating in the Boba Talks work that you all know and love. So that's a little bit about me. Tyler, over to you.
Man, I wish I could say I've managed as much as you've managed, but I feel
But
like
you've
I can't.
marketed, so I
I've
feel like
marketed,
that's just as
so
good.
it's something different. But no, I think for me, where I'll start is I'd like to say that I started my career when I was a teenager because I started a Craigslist business where I was wheeling and dealing some instruments, as you can probably see behind me. That's kind of a passion of mine. So I was always like a little bit entrepreneurial, and when I was doing that, I just fell in love with the idea of how do you market items, how do you get things out, how do you get people excited about them. So I went to school thinking that I wanted to, work in business and particularly work in the music industry. I tried that. It was not for me for reasons to talk about another day. But what that ended up leading me to was the tech world, where I kind of interned at Apple and iTunes and kind of learned that you could do a topic that you were interested in at a totally different company that you didn't think you could work on that topic in. And then after I graduated college, I ended up starting my career in marketing at Google, specifically on Google Play. And then what I learned at Google was I had an opportunity to learn a bunch of different skill sets within marketing. So similarly to Ben, I took the opportunity to kind of jump around. So I worked in partner marketing, then I worked in brand marketing, then I worked in retail marketing, and then I worked in creative marketing, and I did all the marketing that I could do, and then eventually took the leap, joined a startup, and then kind of took the leap again to start my own company. So apparently all things come around, and I'm the same as I was when I was 13.
There you go. You marketed all the markets, and I managed all the management. So there you go. That's what we bring to the table, folks. You're listening to that perspective. And speaking of, so Tyler, I'd love to ask you, like, tell me more about Beyond the Books. Like, what is this podcast about?
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent because I'm very passionate about this
Let's
topic.
do it.
But I think that basically, like our whole lives, for many of us, there's kind of a planned path that we're supposed to take. You're growing up, you're a little kid, you go to school, they say get good grades, and you'll get further along in life. Then you go to high school, and they're like, keep getting good grades. Now apply to colleges, get into the best college you can, and then you go to college, things kind of start to dwindle where it's like you have to start choosing your own major, but it's kind of the same roadmap. They're like, just get good grades and you'll end up getting a good job. And then you get to the point where you're supposed to get that good job. And all of a sudden it's a very, very different ball game where you're kind of deciding there's so many different career paths, there's so many different industries, so many different verticals. Do I want to go to grad school? All of a sudden this roadmap that we had just disappears and we kind of have to figure it out. And so I think in my words, what this podcast is about is kind of conveying some of the learned experiences that you and I have cultivated, along with the guests that we bring in along the way, who've been there, who've kind of faced this moment of, oh no, what's next? And then kind of had to figure out the adulting around that and kind of create our own paths in life. So I think we'll talk about a bunch of topics, but that's kind of the gist of things. But Ben, kind of in your eyes, what's kind of the perspective that you think we're supposed to be taking here?
Love that question because that's exactly what we're going to provide here on this podcast. This is going to sound and feel like two professionals doing a retrospective on their essentially combined 30 years of professional experience. And you'll hear from us in looking back what worked, what didn't work, what really helped. And we want to present the insight that way versus we are teachers and what we say is sort of the right thing to do. Like there's no right or wrong thing. Please take everything you hear, not just from us, but just in general with a grain of salt, because again, like our perspective is perhaps where many of you will be 10, 15 years from now in your careers. But that way you can kind of live multiple lives through us, and maybe use some of the things that we've learned along the way so that you don't have to wait until you're 10, 15 years into your career on that insight as well. So that's how we'll be approaching a lot of things. And that leads us well into our first topic. So Tyler, tell us what is on the agenda for today.
Yeah, 100%. I think that so. Before I jump into today's topic, I want to give a quick shout out to all the people out there who kind of filled out our form and sent in different topics and ideas. Our goal with this is to only be talking about things that you all actually care about.
Yeah.
And so thank you to those folks. And if you have ideas, we'll kind of get y'all the form so you can take a look and tell us what you want to hear. But for today in particular, I think it's a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, just because it's a very complex topic and it's very kind of just interlaced with different thoughts, feelings, and emotions along the way. But that topic is career planning. I think to set the stage a little bit, when we were in college, Ben and I were roommates in school. That's probably why you see us being silly and stupid together, but that's why we're here. But in school, even the two of us, everyone around us, we all had very different kind of mental states when it came to our careers. There was kind of the first group of people who they went to school, they already knew what they wanted to do. They, dreamed of being a doctor. They got to school, they ended up majoring in biology, they ended up going to med school, they ended up becoming a doctor. That's awesome if you know what you want to do. And it's definitely a group of people that, we have reflected in our BobaTalks community, as well as
Yeah.
folks that we've both mentored independently. The second group of people is kind of the people who understand what they're interested in, but don't necessarily know yet how that translates into a job. For example, you might love creativity and you might love that, like mathematics, you might love these different topics, but you don't necessarily yet know, okay, what jobs out there are things that kind of tap into these things that I'm really interested in, but also provide some type of value and thus I get a paycheck. And then the last group of people is kind of the like, I don't know what I'm doing. The people who just kind of were like, I feel lucky to have gotten into college. I am undecided on a major, or I recently decided on a major. I have no idea what I want to do after this. I don't even know if I like my major. In this group, it's totally cool to be in this group as well. We both collectively know a lot of people who have been in all of these groups. And what we can say confidently is, regardless of where you start in these groups, you will find your way. And a lot of what we want to talk about in this podcast is a bit about how you find your way. So if you're here, no matter which group you are in, hopefully we have something for you. That's a bit of our goal. But I wanted to ask Ben, just because I mentioned we went to school together, and I know
You
we've both
know.
had some dynamic careers. Tell me where you fall in these groups.
Yeah, So it's funny. I was probably in one and then quickly became into bucket three after 1 year in school. So I'll expand on that, right? So I applied to school feeling very confident that I was going to be a lawyer. So I took the pre-law route, majored in poli sci, and one pre-law class in, I realized this is the worst major for me because I really don't enjoy reading and I'm not great at writing, and that just makes for a really bad lawyer. But like, to be very clear, I'm very grateful that I came to that realization early on because that gave me time to pivot. So, I think Tyler, with what you're saying, like, so whichever bucket you are, that may not where you end up at the end of your career, and that's totally okay. What I love about it, it gets to a point that I wanted to emphasize, which is to keep an open mind, right? Because a plan is just as good as what you know at the time that you made a plan, but what you know can change and what you can experience can change. And then the plan needs to be thrown violently out the window. And that's totally okay. Like in my case, I chucked it out the window because I'm like, that's not a good career for me. And then quickly moved to something else. So I ended up in HR, as I mentioned earlier. So wanted to emphasize that point. Please keep an open mind and make sure that like your plans stay flexible as a whole. And so this is a great place to then dive into the topic at hand, which is like, here's some insights for how to plan your career. And Tyler, the way I thought we could do this is we will look back and essentially come up with three things that we thought was really helpful or important in planning our careers. And again, this is from our perspective looking back. And then we'll move into a space where it's like three things that maybe weren't as helpful or things to potentially avoid. And then the way this will work is I'll go, then you go, then I'll go, then you go, and then we'll make our way down. Make sense? Any questions?
That was well managed. I can see where, the skill set has been coming in handy.
And we're gonna hear some of your marketing here in just a bit too. So I'll start. The first thing that really matters in terms of your career is know your non-negotiables. So what I mean by that is know what matters to you, what's important to you, and actually what makes you happy. Now, be careful because I'm not saying go work in an area that you have a hobby in. Like if you love video games, go be a game creator. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is understand the dynamics of life that make you happy. So if you're a social person like me and you love building relationships and helping people, you want to make sure that that's part of something you do. Because if you end up with a job where you're stuck behind a spreadsheet in a cubicle and you're lucky if you see another soul during the day, it like you're not really setting yourself up for success, right? And that's important. Similarly, if money matters to you because you support your parents or relatives or siblings, you want to know that early on because you don't want to get interested in a career that doesn't pay anything. I'm not saying money is everything, but if it's everything for you, you don't want to shy away from that. So that's why I say understanding your non-negotiables becomes very important in career planning because those things generally won't change. Your interests can change. And so what I love about this point here is once you know your non-negotiables, you can go into career exploration, majors, locations, which tells you about the industries that are available in those locations. It can then begin to kind of shrink the world a little bit and give you an area to focus on. So that's my top one. Tyler, how about you?
Yeah, I think I'll to kind of tie a bow on what you're talking about. I think what is really important that I take away from that is being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to get off track with the things that you think you might want or what other people are saying you probably should want. But this idea of finding those non-negotiables and really being honest with what you really want, that's a great place to start. And I think to kind of extend that point, what I would say is I had a mentor a long time ago who gave me some really great early career advice, which was to think of your next job or your next career step as a triangle. And at each point in that triangle, kind of have one thing that is probably one of these non-negotiables that Ben is talking
Mm,
about. That thing, for example, if you care about your lifestyle, that might be one of the things that's on there. If you really care about a specific kind of industry, that might be one of the things on there. If you care about a specific role, that might be one of the things on there. But kind of create this triangle with those three things that you care about the most. And then hope that you get two of those things because when you're kind of moving out of college and you're doing that early kind of interviewing, to Ben's point about keeping an open mind, it's important to know that you might not get everything that you want, but where you start, it doesn't mean it's bad if you don't get everything you
yeah.
want. It just means it's a different type of a start. And I think as you kind of go further in your career, your triangle will change, like Ben was saying. You might
Yeah.
start to want more money because you have a family. You might start to want a specific location because you like being at the beach. I don't know. But your triangle might change a little bit, and then you will probably start to optimize for those different things as things go along. And so I think the moral of the story is by having that starting place for yourself, it's a good, reasonable way to get a lot of what you want and find a career place to start where you'll probably learn some things and evolve. So that's probably what I would throw out there.
Love the triangle. What if one of my triangles is like bomb tacos? Like, how do I do? No, I'm just kidding. No, I do have a follow up for you though, which is like I can hear some of the audience members saying, "Well, why can't I just aim for all three?" Like, I mean, you're not saying that you can't aim for all three, but why is the advice to kind of pick two initially?
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit of a realistic answer with what's out there, but when you're first starting out of school, your credentials are pretty on par with a lot of other folks that you'll be kind of competing against for roles. And so if you can find something that ticks a lot of the boxes, there are a lot of things within that role that you might not even know you're interested in that you'll probably find out when you're there. And so, just the goal is to get started in the workforce, but get started in a place that you're comfortable with, not necessarily the place where you're going to end your career. I think as you
Right.
get further along in your career to the point of just life is dynamic, if you're getting promoted, you're probably getting paid more. And if money was one of your things, maybe that falls off and things will
Right.
change on your triangle. But as you kind of move further in your career, you get to discern a little bit more of exactly what you want. You'll probably get more of what you're looking for later on in your career. But when you're early stage, my advice is always just find a place that you are excited to start in and know that there's going to be a lot of learning and adaptability that you'll need to build along the way.
Yeah, and sometimes it's easier just to focus on less things because in the because the world is your oyster, it feels like you may just be lost with all of the options. So actually, sometimes less is more in this case.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to move to the next topic because the triangle sets a really strong framework for my second point, which is know your strengths and play off of them. Right, as you mentioned, Tyler, looking for a job is unfortunately sometimes a competition. Actually, let's be honest, most times it's a competition because you're competing with other candidates. One great place to start in terms of career planning is to identify your strengths or your superpowers, right? Everyone has a superpower, everyone has a strength. If you don't know, I'll kind of close with one way you can find out what those superpowers are. But the idea then is if you know that your superpower is building relationships, problem solving, and being sociable or whatever may be the case, like that actually begins to unlock certain careers that can leverage that strength. So those a couple examples, you might want to look into sales because on the surface it feels like sales is like just trying to like sell stuff, but you actually learn that you're solving people's problems, and one of the ways to solve that is to build relationships with your clients and customers. So this is one of the ways. And then when you piece that together with your non-negotiables, it becomes either a triangle or like a Venn diagram where the overlap becomes an area that you really want to look into, right? So if the overlap between I want to work with people, right? That's a non-negotiable because I like being social. And your skill set is I build really strong relationships and I'm great at problem solving and I can empathize. That overlap could be sales. So this then starts to unlock certain areas that you can go discover a little bit more clearly. And on the point of like, if you're like, I don't really know what my superpower is, don't sell yourself short. Everybody's got superpowers. One suggestion for you to try to discover this is go talk to your friends, peers, coworkers, classmates, professors, mentors, anyone who might know you, who might have worked with you, and you can ask them, what do you think my strengths are as a professional, my superpowers? And then everyone might give slightly differing answers, but what I want you to do is triangulate. So what I mean by that is hear the commonalities across multiple sources, and that's generally where your strengths are. And if it's a surprise to you, congrats, you're humble, and that's amazing. If it's not a surprise to you, then that confirms what you've already kind of felt intuitively, which is these are areas that I lean more strongly into. So my number one and number two go hand in hand to help you explore and kind of ultimately land on a career path. What's your number two, my friend?
I
Oh, go
think
ahead.
to that, well, first off, my superpower is not geometry, and we're using a lot of references like triangles, triangulating Venn diagrams. So apologies if anybody else shares my lack of geometry skills because I'm getting lost in the diagrams here. But no, I think everything you're saying totally tracks. I think where I would take my number two is to kind of build on what you were just saying about where to find your superpowers.
Mhm.
I think personally in school and kind of earlier on in my life, I was definitely more introverted, and so when it came time to figuring out what I wanted to do and what skills I even had, the exercise I went through was what do I actually enjoy doing? Like, what are my hobbies? But then kind of peeling back the onion one more layer to say, what are the skill sets I'm using within these
Mhm.
hobbies that are kind of why I might like these in the first place. I'll take music as an example. If you can't tell, I like music. But music is a really interesting hobby because when you're playing in a group setting, for example, the amount of skill sets you use that you don't even realize you're using is staggering. First, you had to learn an instrument, which meant you had to be detail oriented. You had to learn notes, you
Mhm.
had to learn scales, you had to learn all these different pieces of music that teach you the fundamental hard skill of how to actually make sound that doesn't suck. The second thing you had to do is learn how to listen. A lot of music is you're probably not only playing alone. A lot of the time there are other people, and so you're listening to those around you and trying to say, am I matching the energy? Am I playing the right thing to fit in with the ensemble that's around me? A third thing is communication. Maybe if you're playing with someone, if you're like on a stage playing a rock show and you have a solo, you're going to be playing off of the other members of your band or your group. So you're going to be playing something, but you have to listen to other people and then kind of call in response and actually have a conversation with them musically. And so all these different skills, the ability to just kind of learn a new skill, basically, the ability to communicate, the ability to listen. Those personally all are some of the things that led me to marketing because it's all about understanding an audience, listening to an audience, figuring out how to position something for an audience. And so that's kind of how I found my path personally. Doesn't have to be music. If you love sports, there's a lot there. If you love playing video games, there's a lot there. There are so many skills that we don't even know we're using in our hobbies. And I think
Exactly.
that's a great place to start to figure out how can those translate into just career skills and kind of find things that bounce off of those. So I'll shut up. What's your third?
No, no, no. I was just I was just gonna say, yeah, everyone has a superpower, right? Like that's just it's just about finding out what that is. And you're gonna have to play some music for us at some point because you've used the music analogy. And for folks listening to the audio only, Tyler's got some guitars in the background and some discography and stuff. So we'll see if you can play something for us at some point.
I
Um,
lied. I do not play music. Ignore
he
that.
sings. He
No.
sings.
Okay.
just
No. Please don't do that to me.
Oh, just kidding. All right, we're slightly off the rails, but that's okay. Let's move on to the third thing. For me, it's like just say yes to everything. It's super, super straightforward. As you've learned, I think career discovery and planning is sometimes equal parts planning and sometimes equal parts luck. And we don't know what we don't know. And one of the best ways to know what we don't know is to go try it and say yes, right? And so the advice here primarily stems in my background, right? To say, okay, well, I don't want to do law. That's not good for me. What do I want to do? HR. What do people think about HR from the get go? Company police person. And that's just simply not true. Like there are certain use cases, and we understand why people have this kind of perception of HR. But I was like, HR, I don't know. But someone actually suggested because of my interest and skill set in talking to people, empathizing with them, and helping them with what they're concerned about. You told me to go there, and haven't looked back since. So again, like you will sometimes be pleasantly surprised because you don't know what you don't know. And as you pick up these experiences, the only way to kind of continue to shed light about your career is to say yes, essentially to everything. So I'll end there. How about you, Tyler?
Well, I think it's interesting what you're saying. But before I jump into
Yeah,
anything, I kind of have a question for you, which is
sure.
tell me about a time you said yes and it took you in a special path that you didn't know, where it was going to take you and what happened.
Well, one time I met this random dude in nerd camp and he asked me to be his roommate and I said yes. And now we're starting a podcast together. So like, I don't know. That's the one that comes.
Not bad.
um, No, which is totally fine. I will say this: I think the one that really comes to mind more professionally, which I mean, that to me that's like a very fine answer, right? But I found myself graduating with a poli sci degree, wanting to go to HR, but also not having access to a bunch of tech jobs because I wasn't as analytical. So I actually went to Macy's and picked up a job as a sales manager, where I found myself selling women's shoes. That in itself was not the best role for me, quite frankly. Like I didn't enjoy it, but I will say this: there wouldn't have been a Google career without that time at Macy's. And so sometimes saying yes also, you need to understand that like it's not a forever thing, and that there is sort of this baby step, if you will, to get you somewhere else. So like quite frankly, full stop. there would be no Google career for Ben without Macy's. And very happily said yes looking back. But during that time, that wasn't the right thing for me. So I didn't spend a ton of time there.
I mean, the irony in the words baby step that you use there is also without Macy's, you wouldn't have met your wife nor had your child. So
There you
you never
go.
know where things are going to take you
Say
just by
yes to
saying yes.
everything, and maybe you might find your soulmate. Is what we're saying.
Yeah, apparently. But no, I think okay. I'm gonna go back to what you're talking about though for a second, just to say I think the foil to saying yes to everything is not saying no, which is where I'm gonna kind of take it. Basically the same piece of advice, but I frame it in this way solely to say there's gonna be things that pop up in your career, whether that's early on and before you even get your first job, or during your first job, or somewhere in your earlier stages in your career, where things are going to come your way because as you work hard, new opportunities get unlocked. Some of those are going to be really interesting. Some of those are going to be not interesting. Some of those are going to be kind of in the middle. But a good habit with these is not to say no, because you never know what you're going to learn next if you do kind of capitalize on one of these opportunities. My personal example of this is after I got out of school, I was working on a topic called partner marketing. I thought it was really interesting. I didn't know anything about it. It's not like I specifically had seeked it out, but it's where I landed. And it was cool because I got to learn a lot in that. But I kind of found from my background of being creative and such that I wanted to eventually find a career path that might tap a little bit more into the creativity in addition to some of the more analytical things that I had to do. And an opportunity popped up pretty early in my career to work on a creative team and actually work in brand strategy. But the catch for me at that time was the topic was Wi-Fi, which is not a topic that I specifically ever actively seeked out. I didn't think in my life I would want to, work on that topic. To me, Wi-Fi was like, it's a router, you plug it in, you get Wi-Fi, you can do things now, good to go.
Marketing, baby, let's go.
Marketing. See, he said it. It has happened. We marketed, but
There you
no.
go.
I think that, but with that opportunity, I kind of had a choice, which was, do I want to, for the sake of getting into a discipline of marketing that I'm really interested in, take what I thought at that time was a sacrifice, which was working on a topic that I wasn't quite as interested in. I said yes to that. The reason I look back, and it was probably the best decision I ever made, or one of the better decisions I made in my career, is because I learned two really important things from that experience. The first was the skill set of having the agility to learn a new topic quickly and then work on that topic is something that can't be understated.
That's right.
There's so many times in your career where you're going to be thrust into a new project or a new topic or something that's net new that the company's never done or whatever it might be. And in that situation, you're going to have to learn and you're going to have to execute because that's your job. And so I think for me, learning that by jumping into a topic, I had to all of a sudden become an expert on Wi-Fi. Didn't know anything about it, went to knowing a little bit more about it and enough to market it, I guess. So that was like the first thing that kind of came there. The second thing, and the reason why it's really good I didn't say no to this, was it also served as an opportunity to transition again into a career path that I thought I was a little more interested in. I ended up working on a team where I just learned from fantastic people, and those people really taught me what it meant to kind of be a creative and work in that discipline. And so when it came time after that to move on to the next role, I had already worked on a topic I had to figure out. I started working on a discipline that I was really interested in. And my next role was a topic I was pretty interested in and a discipline I was very interested in. And so to something kind of Ben alluded to in his career path was there's kind of this build that you end up getting, which
Yeah.
is you learn these skill sets, you collect them, you apply them to topics. And then basically as you get more senior, you're just using this arsenal and tool set of skills that you've built up to navigate all work situations and ultimately be working on the type of work you want to work on and the topics that you want to be working on. And so I think again, I kind of stole your advice, but by not saying no, you're also giving yourself license to learn. And it's going to teach you way more in the long run by doing that.
Love it. Love it. No, I agree. And going back to your triangle point, sorry, one more geometry thing, right? Like you started this particular career by not saying no and maybe hit two out of the three things. And then eventually that third one starts to come as you unlock more opportunity later on. So great way to close out sort of the things that kind of helped. Now let's move on to the things that didn't help, because I think this is equally as important. So same thing, I'll start first. For me, it's about like the thing that didn't matter, and you've probably heard this a bunch of times now, is how rigid a career path needs to be. And like or not plausible, but like surprise, it doesn't need to be rigid at all. And what's really funny is we sometimes find that even though you're flexible and you move to different things and try different things, you might find 10 years into your career, 15 years into your career, that there is a connective thread. So I'll kind of double click on that. But I want to just kind of impart that it's important that, you don't put all your eggs in one basket and say, this is my career path 100%. Because like you said, Tyler, it doesn't give you the ability to learn and discover. And so from my example, like even if you remove the law thing, which didn't pan out early on, I was very sure that I was going to have a career in HR, and I did, because I interned as a recruiting intern at NBC Universal. And then my next job at Macy's had some HR elements to it. And then my first job at Google was an HR coordinator. And then I eventually became a product manager. Like, again, if you told me I was going to be a product manager in college, I would have been like, what the hell is a product manager? But here we are nonetheless. And what's really funny is my software experience as a program manager and product manager ended up still having threads of either personnel, like vendor management technology or procurement technology, to now I manage HR technology. So again, there's this interesting connective thread that you don't want to force. And what that tells you, going back to the very, very early point I made, is your non-negotiables, your strengths. Sometimes they'll stay with you throughout. Not always, but that might be the case. So the advice here is just kind of stay flexible and make sure that you're not over-indexing on just one path.
Yeah, I definitely identify with that. I think honestly, a lot of the mentees that I have in BobaTalks and outside of BobaTalks, that a lot of them ask kind of something very similar to this, which is, I had this plan. It's not going according to plan. I started this job and I decided I don't like this. What do I
Yeah.
do? Am I stuck forever? Do I have to go get a second degree to pivot out of this? And the short answer is there's a lot of ways to get out of a career that you might not be interested in. And it's important to know going into it that it's okay if you've chosen a path and it doesn't feel right. I think especially early in your career, pivoting is a lot easier, I've found anyway, than way later in your career. And so having kind of, again, that open-mindedness and knowing how to like just collect skill sets that you can apply in different contexts, it's just going to help you a lot.
Yeah.
I think, to kind of steal the mic from you and also talk about another point of kind of what I don't think, you should do is, I think it's apt to tie this on to the last topic, but the idea of comparing yourself. I think when I graduated college, when Ben graduated college, all of our friends, we graduated at the same time. People went to very different places. Ben left me and went to LA because he's mean to me. I was in the
I told
Bay
you
Area.
tacos is on my triangle, my friend. Just kidding.
Man, you chose wisely. I respect that you
Yeah.
had
Just kidding.
you were honest with yourself.
Right.
But no, I think that we just had a big disbursement of our friends, and they were all
Mm-hmm.
very different, and they all went into very different skills. They all went into very different categories. There were people who went immediately to graduate school. There were people who went into being, in tech. People went into business. People went into all the things under the sun. But I think when that happens, you start to see people's lives form. And especially in your early career, it's really easy to second guess your choices when you hear from other people or see other people in the lives that they're living. For example, let's say I graduated college and I went into marketing, and I have friends who went into investment banking. All of a sudden, they're making the big bucks. I'm making the medium bucks. And all of a sudden, they are able to do all these things with their life that I'm just simply not able to do because I can't afford to do those things yet. And I looked at that early on and I thought to myself, man, maybe I should have gone into finance. I'd be,
Right.
on a yacht or something right now. But in that situation, what is important to remember is there's a whole bunch of the other side of things that you're not seeing. And so when you're comparing yourself to other, you're creating this idea in your mind of what the perfect situation is on that the other end. When in reality, things might be different because back to the triangle thing, their triangles might be different. So, for example, if the person in finance, they cared about money, they cared about, having a flashy lifestyle, sure, they got those things, but the expense was more than likely the hours that they're working. And they
Mm,
might be working to death, whereas you're able to take a break and you have hobbies like, I don't know, yoga, or you have a dog or whatever, and you want to actually enjoy your time beyond
yeah.
your career. And so I think the reason I bring all this up is just to say it's really easy to compare and second guess yourself. But the more productive way of looking at that is just figuring out what can you learn from that. Like what about that is what interests you, and does that become one of your non-negotiables that sits on your
Yeah.
triangle next? And so I think it's important not to compare. It's a good practice just to understand, being honest with yourself. What do you want, and take it from there. Um, yeah, I'll
Can
shut
I
up now.
add no, can I add a personal anecdote on not comparing
Yep.
myself, because this is reminding me. We were seniors in college, and I remember I was walking back to my apartment, and I see a bunch of my friends in suits, and I'm like, "Ooh, y'all are fancy. Where are you going?" They're like, "Oh, we're going to the Big Four recruiting event. Like, are you not coming, or like, are you not recruiting?" And I was like, "What is the Big Four? Like, is this a sports thing? With Big Four what?" And then they were like, you don't know what the Big Four is? You know, all the big like management consulting, iBanking firms that like all. I'm like, what is iBanking? What is? I was super self conscious in that moment. I felt humiliated because I was like, oh my god, like I'm missing out on something. And in that moment, I was comparing my non action, I guess, to them. And I go home, I start Googling, I'm like, management, I'm like, oh, hell no, that's definitely not what I'm interested in. And of course, it made me feel better, but it was just, I still remember that moment. What is it now, like 10 years later? Because it made me feel like, one, it made me feel really behind, but two, I was transported into a place that I had never been. And I was really hard on myself for like that walk home. I was like ashamed, Tyler. I was like legitimately ashamed that didn't know what the hell Big Four was. But that's never stopped me. That's never stopped us, right? And so,
Mhm.
like, it's easy for me to say that because we're in our careers, but it's really important to part with like, do not compare yourself with others. And on the point of others, I wanted to, transition to my second point of the do not do or not helpful is, please don't make decisions about your career for other people. Now, again, to clarify, I'm not saying don't ask people for advice. You probably would be listening to this podcast if you were not open to advice. What I'm saying is don't make decisions about your career because your mom or your dad said, like, you should go be this thing, or your community has this, pressure or direction to go be a lawyer or doctor or whatever, right? Because those are like the, more flashy titles. The problem with that is very simple. You're dishonest with yourself, and you find a lot of people. Tyler and I have a ton of friends who know they're not happy with their careers. They know they're not happy with their job. There's a little voice inside them that said, why did I choose this career? Or would I be happier doing this other thing? Or did I miss out on a career or a life path that I didn't get to do because I felt like I had to stay close to home and be near home, or I had to, again, make decisions for others. And that to me, that's a very popular thing, actually. We get a lot of people, a lot of the Boba Talks that I have are, well, I think my parents would disapprove if I didn't do these 8 fields, but none of those things interest me. And I'm like, who are you living your life for? Right now, I know that will ruffle some feathers and that might ostracize people that you care about. And so I'm not suggesting that you go full nuclear and just like ignore people. But again, I want you to think about decisions and how it impacts you first, while also thinking about what others may expect of you, because we all live as part of communities and like acknowledge that that's important. But your career is one of those things that only you will have to deal with the positives or the negatives, and hopefully they're all positives, and generally more positives will come if you pick based on what you want versus what others want. So I know it's a little heavy. That's like, kind of like my second thing.
I
Tyler,
think,
how about you?
yeah, I mean, I honestly, I want to tack on to what you said with
Yeah,
a
yeah,
phrase
please.
my fiance, who is far, far smarter than me, has told me to use. And I think it's probably one of the greatest phrases that exists, which is "thank you for your input," which I think is a very good when you're dealing with situations, especially when you're getting advice and direction from people who you respect, your mentors, your parents, your teachers, your whomever. They might have some strong opinions about what you should do, and the way that they phrase kind of what you should do is sometimes like a "do this" instead of a
Yeah,
"here are some considerations." And I think by using that phrase, thank you for your input, it's a good way to remind yourself that ultimately you're going to make the decision. And everything you're collecting along the way is just words of wisdom from other people. But ultimately, it's your choice. And I think having that self authority is really important. And reminding yourself that you're in charge is really important. Um,
Thank you for your input, Tyler. No, I'm just kidding. I truly value your input, so I said that unsarcastically, but I had to throw that in there. And by the way, if your reaction to what we're saying is thank you for your input, that's fine too. That's fine too.
yeah, Yeah, I mean, I'm a little sad, but no, I'm just kidding.
I'm
I can't not listen to my own advice, or I guess my
right.
fiance's advice. Anyway, to get us out of this rabbit hole, I'll kind of spin us up in a different way. I think my number two thing to kind of not do is handcuff yourself to your major. I think that a lot of people go into school, and whether they've already decided their major or haven't decided their major, but then decided in school, all of a sudden they're like, this is it. This is what I'm going to be doing. But you might do your major, be walking across the stage at graduation and realize this is not for you. It's not something that interests
Yeah.
you. Maybe there's not enough jobs in that like fields that you feel drawn to. And that's okay. I know plenty of people who have done certain majors and ended up in totally different jobs and are doing phenomenally well. People who studied biomechanical engineering who became marketers, people who studied pre-law and poli-sci like Ben and became HR professionals.
Oh,
So there's all these different types of things under the sun that you can do once you get into the professional world, and it doesn't have to feel like it's one-to-one with your major whatsoever. Um, the reason I kind of bring this up is in a lot of the mentees that I have, they feel like they've only learned certain skill sets through their major that are applicable to that major. But as an example, if you learn something in the sciences, like let's say you're a mathematics major, what you're learning is analytical problem solving. What you're learning is how to understand a situation, dissect it, and then come up with a creative and correct solution to it. You do the same thing in marketing. Like if I took the job of
right.
marketing as an example and said, how do I create a good campaign? What I'm trying to do is dissect the problem. What I'm trying to do is then find a creative solve to the problem and then put something out there that actually feels resonant. So I think all this to say, majors will teach you different underlying skill sets that are applicable beyond what the major topic is itself. And if you feel not drawn to that topic in the real world, just know those skills will apply in other places.
Freaking love it. And we obviously didn't coordinate on this because that's my number three as well. I said, don't feel pressure to match your major. And then I'll just add one thing more pragmatically, right? Coming from HR as well. Many jobs that aren't like super specialized or super technical, if you look at the job description, it says, we would like you to have a degree. That's totally fine. And so I think some people feel like, oh well, if I go, into that competition for jobs and I have a different major than the rest of them, like generally that's not going to hurt you. Again, unless you're applying for some like very specific role or academic or something like that, then maybe, and they'll say that on the job description. So pragmatically, it's not too late, even if you graduate college and say, I've got a degree, I'm not going to use it. And that's okay, because here I am with a poli sci major, as you said, and I'm in tech, right? And it's something that you check off the box at some point and you move on with your life. And so that's totally okay. I have nothing to add and would invite you to go to your third.
Yeah, no, I think where I'll kind of take my third one is about fear and courage, which is going to sound very lofty, but I'm going to throw it out there. I think the hardest thing to do is have the courage to understand that you can make changes. And if I learned anything early on in my career and throughout everything we've talked about today, this idea of having the agility to change your mindset and work through things
Yeah.
and kind of navigate your career with the same tact that you would navigate your relationships in life and all the complicated things that come our way. Being courageous and not putting aside things just because you're a little bit afraid is really, really important. And so my no here is don't be scared, because honestly, a lot of people have been in your shoes where you might be in a place where you're still feeling lost. And the number one thing that you can do is just keep being curious and asking questions. You never know where those things will lead you. You never know where they'll take you. if you were Ben 10 years ago, you might ask those friends, what is the big four? And they could have made fun of him, but they also could have been like, the big four is this. Do you want to come with us? And his whole life could be different. We have no idea. But the point is, if you aren't scared like Ben was in that moment,
Right.
you might have
That's right.
a very different, outlook on things. But don't be afraid to ask questions and put yourself out there and try to make changes where you feel compelled to do that.
Love it. 10 year ago, Ben, thanks you for that. I appreciate it. I feel like we've just, I've gone through therapy now and I feel like I've released that particular moment.
I'm glad I could rip off the wound, but in that in that regard, I'm gonna stop us on this tangent so we can kind of close out. But
Yeah.
I think we talked about a lot of stuff today. Hopefully, a lot of you found it helpful, and if so, let us know. And if you didn't find it helpful, let us know because we
Yeah.
are open to all feedback. We want to make sure that we're putting stuff together that interests you and solves the questions that you have for life after college. So please let us know through the forum or comments what you want to hear next, and we'll get it in the queue. But for now, to close this one out, I wanted Ben to ask you if you could have everyone who listened to this just remember one thing from today, what would it be?
Right. Stay flexible. That's probably not a surprise, right? Stay flexible. And I would also add one point I haven't discussed yet, which is like have fun with it. Like that it should be fun to go down a path of discovery and learning. I know there's always some uncertainty and that can be scary. Finding a job right now is very tough. I know I was previously laid off last year and I had to be on the job hunt. Like I know it can be scary, but also have fun because you'll find that you're opening doors that you'll really enjoy walking through and spending time on. And it comes with the bad. Sometimes there's bad, but sometimes there's a lot of good. So again, keep an open mind and have lots of fun with it. How about you, Tyler?
Yeah. I mean, mine's going to be very similar. And sorry to everyone if this sounds very redundant, but the way that I would probably describe it is in a simplified phrase: know that you'll need to find a balance of intentionality and open mindedness.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we do is it's really easy, especially early on, to be like, I think I want to do this, and really to chase something that is
Yeah.
particularly interesting to you. But again, things change, and the best thing that you can do is stay open to other opportunities so you can understand what do you start to gravitate toward. What are the things that actually light you up? What are the things that you actually want to get out of bed and work on?
Yeah.
And so I think by finding that balance of intentionality and open mindedness as you navigate your career, you'll probably find yourself in some places you didn't expect to be, but you're going to feel at home and you're going to feel like I'm exactly where I should be. And so that's what I would probably leave everyone with. So, on that note, what I'd have to say is thank you for tuning in to the very
Thank
first
you.
episode of Beyond the Books. We appreciate you being here, and we hope to do many more of these, and we hope you'll continue to join us. And remember, as you move forward in things, the best chapters in your life are the ones that you write yourself. Thank you.
All right. Take care. See y'all.
Bye.